Hello everyone, this is David Kissel. I am the Development Director here at St. John's. Just here to give you some information about this year's annual fund drive that we kicked off a few weeks back. This year's campaign, we've got three main areas that we're looking to have the funds raised to benefit. Number one being our operating expenses. Number two being to help with some capital improvement and maintenance items that we've identified. And number three is the establishment of an emergency reserve fund for future capital expenses, which I'll talk about here in just a minute. So we take a look here at the first area being our operating expenses. The reality here in the parish is that our weekly offertory, our fundraising efforts such as festival and the different things that we do throughout the year do not cover our operating expenses to the fullest each year. So that's where the annual fund drive really helps to close that gap and provides us with the additional income that we need to be able to keep our lights on, the doors open, to operate our ministries, the different programs and things that we do throughout the year. It's important to also remember that within our operating expenses is our annual commitment to the Archdiocese of Cincinnati and paying back our debt that we incurred for the building of the new church and the school addition and the Undercroft back in the late 1990s. So we have a commitment of $130,000 per year. That breaks down to we pay $5,000 every 2 weeks to the Archdiocese for that debt payment. So our operating expenses, that's a big piece of that, and the annual fund helps to essentially make those debt payments possible so that we can continue to make progress on paying back that loan that was incurred back in the 90s for the, again, building of our church, the school addition down in the Undercroft. So the estimated need this year from this year's campaign is right around $110,000. Again, that's estimated. That's in discussions with the Finance Commission to say how much we think is a realistic number that we're going to need to plug in to close that gap. So the operating expenses being area number one for this year's campaign. The second area within this year's campaign deals with the capital maintenance and improvement needs and items in our facilities and throughout the campus that have been identified. There's not necessarily one main big ticket item that we're looking to take care of, but rather it's a number of different items, kind of a laundry list of things that have been need to be looked at. Believe it or not, the church is 15 years old. Our parish center is almost 30 years old, and parts of our school date back to the 1920s, other parts the 1950s, and then there's also another section, the 1960s. So we're starting to see the wear and tear of aging facilities and things that are starting to pop up and need to be addressed. So we have an estimated need. The Buildings and Grounds and our Finance Commission have estimated that around $30,000 would be needed from this year's campaign to take care of these various items. So, for example, there's a couple there that we've listed. The upkeep, the maintenance on the church heating and air rooftop units. There's 6 units on top of the church. At 15 years old, they require a lot of maintenance and upkeep to try to extend the life of those units as long as we possibly can. But reality is that we know that at some point we're going to need to replace those completely. It's estimated around $10,000 would be the expense per unit to replace those at some point. And those involved, those in the field of the heating and air in the parish have told us that we should anticipate over the next 3 to 5 years we're going to need to replace those, all of those units. That's just essentially the life that you'll get out of these type of heating and air units. We also look at things like the church carpet within the pews. Maybe you've seen that they're starting to bubble up in various places, there's a safety concern, people tripping, but also just the way it looks within the church. So that needs to be looked at and taken care of. And then we also just look at things such as the upkeep, the maintenance of our school, the aging facility there, the classrooms, and the different things. So there's just a number of things that within our maintenance, capital improvement that we're looking to take care of, and that's what a portion of this year's campaign would be used for. Area number 3 really goes hand in hand with the second part of this year's campaign. The final piece is we're looking to establish an emergency fund for capital expenses. So essentially we look out and we see an aging facility, we see some things that are coming down the road, and we need to begin to prepare for those. One example I just mentioned being that the heating and air units on our church. I mean, to replace all 6 of those units, we're looking at $60,000+. I mean, that's a big expense that the parishes needs to begin to consider, to think about, and begin to hopefully set aside some funds beginning with this year's campaign so that we're prepared. The thinking is that as these items take place in the years ahead, that we can take care of those expenses. We've prepared correctly, and we have the funds on hand so that our ministries, our programs, our services, everything that we do as a parish community is not affected when it's time to take care of our facilities. So really, depending upon, we've got a number of different items that we've identified within our maintenance schedule this year, but the reality is that some of those may or may not come to fruition. So, if our heating and air units on the top of the church, for example, if we can extend the life of those and they don't need to be replaced this year, and we can get by with some general maintenance and upkeep, and we can kick that expense a few more years down the road, that's more funds that we have on hand to set aside for this emergency fund for when those expenses do occur. So really, We've estimated that $30,000 will be needed to take care of those capital improvement maintenance items this year, but it's kind of a have to wait and see mentality to see if we need to utilize that entire amount. And if we don't, that's just more money that we can put towards area number 3 here, being the establishment of that emergency fund for capital expenses. I will note there, you see at the bottom of the slide, it talks about a school boiler, which is within the 1960s portion of the school. That is the original boiler, so it is over 50 years old. So we've gotten a lot out of the life of that boiler, but at some point, yes, it's going to need to be looked at to be replaced. Again, it's one of those things that we've been told we're on borrowed time a little bit, but general maintenance and upkeep could extend the life of that. But also, we know the reality is that at some point that's going to need to be replaced completely. So these are just some of those big ticket items that we've got on the back of our minds that are on the horizon, that we're hoping with this year's annual fund we can begin to prepare, begin to set aside some of these funds so that when the day comes we do need to take care of these expenses, the life of the parish is not affected. So we've set a goal this year at $200,000, and that really is just adding up the need to close the gap on our operating expenses, the estimated need for those capital improvement and maintenance items that have been identified, and then just the remaining funds to set aside to have a decent amount on hand to help with that emergency fund that we hope to establish. So the operating expenses at $110,000, the capital improvement and maintenance has been estimated around $30,000, and that leaves around $60,000 would be on hand if we reach our goal of $200,000 to set aside for that emergency fund for the future. So these are the 3 main areas that we look to cover with this year's campaign. I'll be very honest and say, how do we get excited about capital improvement and maintenance? I think it's an opportunity for us to really take a step back and say, what does fixing heating and air rooftop units in our church, what's that allow us to do? What are the things that take place within our walls of all of our facilities? What gives us life here at St. John's? What makes us a parish? And I think about our numerous ministries that we put forward on a daily basis, from our St. Vincent de Paul Society, helping those families in need, to our bereavement committee, helping families in the time of loss of a loved one, to our pastoral area school, to our seniors group, to our liturgical ministries that serve at weekend masses, to our pastoral council and commissions, to our scouts, our Boy Scouts, our Girl Scouts, to our athletic teams. And the list goes on and on and on, the numerous ways that we're a parish. But most importantly, that we have a beautiful church to gather together, to celebrate Mass, so that we can be nourished and strengthened in our faith, so we can go out in the world and make a difference wherever life may lead us. So I really believe that this year's campaign is so much more than just taking care of our operating expenses and capital improvement and maintenance. it's really a chance for us to reflect on what are we about as a parish community? What are we called to do here at St. John's? So I invite you to consider your gifts to this year's campaign and invite your support through the gifts of prayer, the gifts of involvement, and the gifts of finance. I hope that you'll support this year's effort and help as we continue to strive to be the best parish we can be for many years to come. So I thank you, and God bless.